In this video, we're going to jump into another graphics program. I have one pretty big idea that I'm trying to teach you through this example, so we'll see what that looks like at the end. Let's hit the new class button. Let's make this a graphics program, and we're going to call this Spotlight. Not stoplight, Spotlight. If you imagine what a spotlight is, it's kind of like a big light up in the sky, right? Often they have them for like concerts or maybe really big football games or other sports games or something like that. We're going to make it so that we have a big yellow light that actually follows our mouse around the screen. So to do that, we need to first make an instance of something. If it's going to be a big light, probably a G-oval is a good way to go. Let's do G-oval light. Right, I've declared my variable or my instance called light, and it's an instance of the class G-oval. Let's say light, can't spell, light equals new G-oval. And let's just do, we're going to put it at 0, 0 to start. And let's make this 100, 100. Now, it's been a while since we've made a graphics program where we've kind of just put random numbers in here. What do we normally use when we're doing this, or what have we got in the habit of using? We've got in the habit of using constants. Let's say I wanted to change the size of this light, I'd have to change both of these numbers. So for the first time, let's actually create our own constant. Up here, let's type, these are all the words you have to type to make a constant: private, static, final. Let's make this an int. Let's call it radius equals, and for now, let's just do 50. Since this is the radius, remember these two numbers for a G-oval are the width and the height. So let's make this radius times 2 and radius times 2. Again, we didn't necessarily need to make this a constant, but it's a pretty good practice if you're ever going to be doing something in a program where you're just kind of using numbers randomly. It's pretty common that you might write a program. You don't necessarily know exactly how big you want something to be. So if you make it a constant, it makes it easier to change and adjust and try out different things. What color is a light? Let's do yellow. Light dot set color to color dot yellow. And let's do light dot set filled to true. And last but definitely not least, let's add light. And let's just see what this looks like. Let's compile. Let me go ahead and run the Spotlight program. And there it is. Honestly, might be a little bit small. Let's make our radius, instead of 50, let's do 75 and see what that looks like. See how easy it is for me to change and rerun that since it's a constant? That's pretty good. I like that. It's nice and sizable. Now, how can we make this move or track our mouse as we're moving our mouse around the screen? Well, remember, there was that special method that we used when we made the Click for Kayla program. That method was called mouse clicked. We actually changed that at the end to do something with a method called mouse moved that actually did something every time the mouse moved. I think that's the one we want to use here. The way to write that method is public void mouse moved, mouse event. Remember, that event is just the idea of something is happening kind of on the screen, or there's some input into my computer. Well, what do I want to do when I move the mouse? Don't I want to set the location of the light to be the location of the mouse? So let's do light.setLocation to event.getX and event.getY. And that seems like that should be good, right? But there's a slight problem with this when I try to compile. It actually doesn't let me. And let's actually look at this error and see what it says. It says undeclared variable light. And I'm looking at this and being like, What do you mean undeclared variable? I declared it right here. And this is the new thing that I actually have to teach you about how variables in Java work. Variables only exist within the curly braces where you declare them. So light is actually only a variable that exists inside the run method, and that's because I declared it in the run method. So how can I actually fix this? Is I can move where I'm declaring this variable to actually be outside of the run method. So what did I do? Well, I knew I wasn't going to be able to use light inside mouse moved because it was declared in here. So I changed the scope of this variable. What I mean by scope is basically a fancy word for where the variable lives. Before, the scope of light was just inside run method. Now, light, this variable, can actually be seen in any method that I write. There's actually a fancy word for this in computer science, and that's called a global variable. Global variable means that that variable can be seen by any method you're writing within that program. So now that I moved light up here, this no longer gives me an error down here. So let's compile this and let's run it. And there we go. We can make this a little bit better. Right now, the mouse is kind of tracking the top left corner of the light. Let's make it actually track the middle. Don't we actually want to move the light to the left by a radius and up by a radius? So I think we just need to do minus radius and minus radius. Let's compile this, and if we run this again, there we go. That's a lot more satisfying now. How did we know that light needed to be a global variable? Because we were referring to it in different methods. If we're referring to a variable in different methods, that means it probably needs to be a global variable because it needs to be seen by both of those methods. Now, it's a really common thing that you might be writing a program, make what's called a local variable, that's a variable that lives inside of a particular method, and then realize later on, like we did, that it needs to be global, and then move it to be global. When you do that, make sure you don't do this. There's a huge problem that I've now done here, which is I have double declared the variable light. This light is the local one. That's the one that I end up initializing here, setting the color and adding. The global light I declared up here, but this one actually never gets initialized or added to the screen. So when I go ahead and I run this, you're going to see that it won't actually track the mouse because this one has not actually been put on the screen or even initialized at all. So be really, really careful when it comes to global variables. Make sure you're not double declaring them because it won't work the way that you want it to. Now that we've learned what a global variable is, let's actually quit out of the Spotlight program and let's go really quickly back to the Bouncing Bakir program, or yours might be called something slightly different. It's really common that when we have a program like this where there's some sort of animation, we'll actually break down the program into two separate methods. One that kind of is doing the setup for the program and one that's doing the animation. Often when we do this, we call this the animation loop. So let's go ahead and do that. Remember, decomposition is always something we want to be going for, and this method is definitely getting a little long for run method. So let's do public void animation loop. It's going to be one of our methods. The other one is going to be, let's do public void set up variables is always a good name. So setting up the variables, I would argue that this is kind of the variable setup and that the velocity kind of is part of the animation loop. So let's take this and let's put this inside setup variables. And then let's make sure we call the setup variables method up here. And then let's take the rest of this and let's put this in the animation loop. And let's make sure we call animation loop. Now, this would be fantastic, and look what a beautiful run method we have now, except for one thing. If I scroll down, I now have that same error that I had before, which is that my animation loop doesn't actually know the variable Bacur. Well, what do I need to do? How do I solve this problem? Bacur needs to be a global variable. So I'm going to do this. Let's do gimage Bacur. Now, once I've done that, there should be an alarm bell right now going off in your head. What have I accidentally done here? I have gimage Bacur at the top and also gimage Bacur down here. I've double declared my variable. How do I fix it? I have to get rid of this gimage here. Now I'm just initializing my variable. And now this will work exactly the same way, but what was the point of this? A, to show you that you should still be thinking about decomposition every single time you make something, and B, to kind of show you when global variables might come in handy. A lot of times you will go through this process of you're writing some code, you want to make a method for something, you realize that you want to use a variable that you declared in a different method in the method that you're making, and you realize that you may need to make it into a global variable. Let's go ahead and run this and just make sure it looks exactly the same as before. And there we go. None of the functionality has changed. My code is just slightly better organized now. So what did we really learn in this video? What was the big idea? Was this idea of a global variable, a variable that can be seen by all of the methods in your program. When do you need to make a variable be global? When it needs to be seen by more than one method.